Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very special segment today on the 7th day of March 2022. Well, it is a beautiful day out there, 24 degrees and sunny. Doesn't get better than this right here. This is beautiful Brisbane, and we've just come out of the floods, but if you look out there, it's looking amazing. But of course, our heart goes out to all the people who are going through all the big cleanup that's happening right now. As we know, that is a very, very hard process. And a special thanks to all the people, who volunteered and who are now signed up with the Mud Army. And amazing work that everyone's doing. Mates standing by, mates, everyone coming out, strangers coming out, helping people, neighbors coming out and assisting neighbors. So that's a lot. Well, very hard hit and stricken area is Lismore, where there's so much damage out there that it is just incomprehensible how long it will take for them to get back on track. There is acute shortage of food and petrol's running out and so many things. And now the telecommunications outage there is not helping things at all. Later in the news, we will look at where these houses are built and that Australia needs to now take a little bit more closer look at flood-prone areas, when issuing building permits. Maybe there has to be a closer look at all those. Well, right now, of course, we know the news that everyone woke up to, and a very sad news is about Shane Warne. He's going to be accorded a state funeral. He is the state of affairs of what's happening. So,
by a nation.
Really just want to get Shane home. That's all we want to do. Thank you.
Thank Superintendent Yutana and his team here at the Wapun Police Station and the hospital in Gorsamui for facilitating this process and getting Shane Warne back to Australia as quickly as possible. They've been very compassionate, very efficient and very understanding. So thank you, Superintendent.
Here, the police superintendent says his body will be taken back to Australia after an autopsy. He is a legend of the country, he says, and he will be honoured. Outside the Koh Samui Resort, a small but growing tribute.
People who care about the game will come along and pay the respects, hopefully. People love the guy.
Shane Warne's manager and friend has shed some light on his final hours. He'd been watching the cricket and was planning to meet friends for a drink in the resort bar when he didn't show up. His mate, Andrew Neofitu, went to Shane Warne's room.
Come on, Warnie, wake up, and then realised there was something wrong, and that then started a 20-minute procedure of, CPR, mouth-to-mouth, etc., and, unfortunately, he was then put in an ambulance, and then when he got to hospital, he was pronounced dead. The king of spin was gone. It's believed he suffered a massive heart attack. Here, the medical director says staff tried to resuscitate Warne, the doctor declaring he'd passed away before he got to hospital. 52-year-old Shane Warne was just 2 days into a 3-month break. He'd put himself on a health kick, Operation Shred, as he called it, but he'd also told his friends he'd been sweating and suffering chest pains. Thai police saying he'd recently seen a doctor about his heart. In a nation now mourning a sporting great, no one is feeling the loss more than his 3 children, Summer, Brooke and Jackson. Jackson just said we just expect him to walk in the door. This is like a bad dream. And today, former Prime Minister John Howard rugged up in his Aussie cricket uniform to lead the honours.
You could work out why he was such a good bowler when you listen to his commentary, because he knew the intricacies of the game, and all great players are like that. From his former fiancée, actress Elizabeth Hurley, a photo tribute to their love story. I feel like the sun has gone behind a cloud forever, she wrote. Rest in peace, my beloved Lionheart.
He was really fun. He was really adorable, really adorable.
Of course, on screen, no one loved Warnie more than Sharon.
Was that a flipper?
Yeah. Sorry I'm late. I've been practising a bit cricket as a surprise for you, Sharon.
I love you, Wayne.
Magda Zabansky, remembering a man who was smarter than we gave him credit for, who oozed charisma, who had time for everyone.
I was so struck. He was so sweet, you know, gentle and really thoughtful. And I went, oh, wow, I get it. I get that charm. I mean, I'm a gay lady, but I was like, wow, I could see the charm. I was completely won over, absolutely bowled over. I was bowled over by Shane.
Shane Warne played his first and last Test matches here at the SCG. He took more wickets on this ground than any player in history. But like all of us, Shane Warne had his flaws, but he owned it. He showed us exactly who he was, and we still loved him. Perhaps all the more for it.
He was the sort of person that literally could talk to the Queen of England and the dustbin man at the same time. In fact, you know, I've said it before that he could almost persuade the Queen to take out his dustbin.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks very much.
When Shane Warne farewelled Test cricket, a stadium was on its feet. Now, a nation, bowled over, prepares for the goodbye we just weren't ready for. Lizzie Poole, 9 News.
And the legend that he was will always be remembered. Well, right now, getting back to the floods, and of course, the Paratat is saying that almost 2,000 homes are inhabitable.
We will obviously rebuild in areas where it's safe to do so. To date already, we've had about 3,500 inspections of flood-damaged homes, and around 2,000 of those already are not habitable, so they will need to be rebuilt. As we rebuild homes, as we rebuild businesses, we will need to do so in a way that ensures that when the next flood occurs, that we have less damage. There's no doubt about that.
And of course, that is the side of things, and the big clean-up which has begun. It is very, very hard and very heartbreaking for many.
This isn't the Brisbane River. It's a creek in suburban Ashgrove, close to Brisbane CBD.
Unbelievable. More anxious than scared. Like, your home is your home, so when you see it sort of potentially threatened like that, and that's the helplessness, is there's nothing you can do.
The creek, normally behind Brett Ambrose's family home, is one of 22 creeks, along with 3 rivers, that make up the catchment for a city built on a floodplain. The largest downpour in the state capital and surrounds history caused yet another devastating and deadly flood for a city with a long record of disasters.
We knew it flooded here, so we've built that way, but that level of water was so extreme. Yeah, if it got more than that, that just becomes a bit, you know, unknown and uncertain.
It's not by accident that Dr. Margaret Cook lives on the top of a hill at Ipswich, west of Brisbane, away from creeks and rivers.
Not at all. I mean, I'd be foolish not to. But having said that, I still got flooded on the weekend from overland flow because it came through the stormwater drains.
She's an environmental historian and author of a recent book about the Brisbane River catchment called A River with a City Problem. Dr. Cook says this flood was a hybrid of previous disasters.
In 2011, it was mainly in the headwaters and largely over Wivenhoe Dam and upstream. This time, lots of water fell downstream of the dam and into the creek systems.
Even so, the equivalent of 4 Sydney harbours flowed into the major drinking water and flood mitigation dam. This is Kedron Brook at its beautiful Brisbane Best, about 6 kilometres north of the city. But at the height of the crisis, it looked like this. When the rain stopped, the water threatening this bridge was mostly gone in 16 hours.
Australia has very variable river systems, but Brisbane is supposed to have the most variable, so it's very prone to flooding.
Dr. Cook says now is an opportunity to reflect and take action, because with climate change, things are predicted to get worse.
If these floods are coming more frequently and potentially getting bigger, we need to change the dynamic. At the moment, we spend a lot of our energy in cleanup. We spend most of our money in cleanup. We need to change that so we spend more money on preventative measures.
The academic says there are lots of well-known strategies that can help.
we can change how we build our houses. I'm in a Queenslander, so the water can flow underneath. We really need to look at our planning codes about where we're building.
Either creek or river flooding or overland flows have affected every suburb in a city of 2.5 million people. People have died and lives have been upturned.
I sit back and weep at the moment for the loss of lives and the loss of property and think, oh my goodness, we need to start making some difficult decisions.
Lord Mayor Adrian Schrinner says Brisbane, an Olympic city in 2032, has always had to deal with water.
The story of Brisbane has always been a story that has had flooding in it, and it's about taking a risk management approach.
He says many lessons have been learned.
There's things that we can continue to do, but there was a lot done after 2011 that has improved the situation, but we're always open to working with the community, working with other levels of government to make any improvements that are necessary.
Brett Ambrose believes with climate change, flooding's going to happen more and more. But for now, ahead of discussions with his wife, he's willing to take the risk at his home.
There's a few days in that long period of time it's not good, but the rest of the time it's really nice. So it's a balancing act, but we're just really lucky we managed to get through this, you know. And we did. That's a bit of a clean-up. It's a bit of a job ahead of us, but that's all right, you know.
John Taylor, ABC News.
Bit of a work in front of you, and you know, there's work that needs to be done, so that does need to be done. Well, as we know, that right now the Queensland flood appeal has been raised. So what is happening and what's happening on the ground? Let's hear from our Premier.
Brisbane.
We'll have to come back to that with the sound on it.
Evacuate now before all evacuation around Park Road.
That was the most horrible feeling, is just running out of options. I had a fridge tied to the front of the house to float in.
The water just kept rising and rising early Monday morning.
Our neighbours were on the roof. There were people down in the inner part of South Lismore across Casino Street that were in their cavities, not realising that as the water went up they couldn't get out of their cavities. So they were screaming and banging on the roof.
Eleanor and Kim knew they had to get out.
Our daughter texted us and said, go to the front of the house, stay at the window because there will be people at some stage in boats passing, and Eleanor went to the window and
screaming my head off when I saw a dinghy going past.
They were rescued, not by emergency services, but by a local in his boat.
This is where Mum and I were for 6 hours. I ended up standing on our kitchen bench and it was nearly up to my neck.
Going house to house, almost everyone has a remarkable story of how they were saved.
I call them the boat people. If it hadn't been for the boat people, there would be thousands dead in Lismore. I'm telling you now.
But not everybody made it out. And now that people are left to pick up the pieces, there is also time to reflect.
I rang emergency services at 5 in the morning and they said, leave your number and we will get back to you because the queue's too long. They called me at midnight that night after we'd been rescued saying, do you still need help?
The response, or lack thereof, is now being scrutinised, and much attention is on the SES.
Last week I'd spoken in Parliament about our SES and I said how wonderful our volunteers are. I said they did need to be more resourced.
We'll get through it.
5 days after Monday's devastation, the Premier arrived in Lismore.
Was there an absolute failure in our emergency response on that day?
I can't say that yet, but I will once I've been able to go through everything and make a determination. I'll be completely honest in relation to the situation, because if we're not honest about it, then we can't act on it and improve the situation that occurred.
Does the entire system need to be overhauled?
Well, I think that's almost certain.
While there will undoubtedly be an inquiry, there is a sense of urgency to respond to what is unfolding now.
The emotions, there's grief, it's anger now. We're angry and exhausted, so exhausted.
Narelle Bolton and her husband Matthew own a lawnmower and power tool business. Like every CBD shopfront, it went under. And as they start the clean-up, the city has been further crippled by a blocked highway, no power and serious supply issues.
We just feel like we're forgotten.
We have 2 supermarkets to cater for the whole region.
Yeah.
There's truckloads coming in every night. 100 people are allowed in the supermarket. They're sold out by 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
There is no food.
Flooding in Ballina has caused similar problems, and people there have spent the week with very limited communication services. Outside of the cities, in smaller communities, the situation has been dire. Crucial infrastructure has been destroyed, the ground in some areas is unsafe, and they have been alone through it all.
We're okay. I've got really good friends, very good, loyal friends and family, so very, very lucky.
Coraki is south of Lismore and has been cut off for most of the week. It is just one of dozens of places in the Northern Rivers that is in desperate need of help.
We need to get our town back up and running, and it's going to just take a lot of help, and the government needs to help us.
As a start, up to 5,000 ADF personnel are now being called upon to help clean up.
We call it boots on the ground, I don't mind, I just want to see khaki.
These floods have left thousands of people homeless. Just in Lismore, 1,000 homes have already been officially declared uninhabitable. Many are staying with friends and family, but there are 1,000 people in an evacuation centre with nowhere to go.
These people are incredibly vulnerable and they're just been through something horrific, and it's just, going from bad to worse for a lot of people.
What we need to do is not just use the hotels and the apartments that are available, but in addition to that, I want to make use of potential Airbnbs, and we're working very closely with them about potentially opening them up and working with the government on some financial support to do that.
The Premier is making big promises to provide funding for whatever is needed. So far, the only committed money is the disaster relief cash from the Commonwealth, and the state is offering farming and business grants.
$50,000, which is wonderful, but you have to spend it to get it. You have to produce your invoices. I don't understand that. Who's got $50,000 left after all of this?
There is no plan yet for how this massive recovery will work. It was just a few weeks ago that the Premier acknowledged, 2 years on from another devastating disaster, the Black Summer bushfires on the south coast, that so many people there felt abandoned by the government. So while the focus is very much on the immediate situation, the bigger challenge is, once the debris is cleared, to ensure that help is here for years.
Government comes in, charity donations come in, support is provided in the short term, but there's so much long-term pain, and if I've learned anything from Bega, I'm not going to let that happen here.
But there are some reservations about rebuilding in such a flood-prone location where insurance is not an option.
We need to move to Gunnellabar.
We need to move it. Let's lift the town and move it up higher, because we really cannot live on a knife's edge like this.
It's a conversation that comes up sometimes in Lismore. What do we do in the CBD? Do some of us go elsewhere? I said that breaks my heart even thinking about it.
In a place that has already endured so much.
The whole city's traumatised, and the confidence of people have been through floods before, and they are tough, Yeah. But, even those tough people had it, they were stretched,
Lismore's a beautiful town. I absolutely love it. And it will come back, but there's going to be a lot of heartache and it's a long road. It's going to be a long road. but we will get there.
A long road to recovery, and our heart goes out to those people there. Some amazing stories coming out
Hi
of there.
Queensland. Well, today we launched the Queensland Flood Appeal. We've put in the state government $2.1 million. But I just want to give you an example. We've got here where a family has lost all of their possessions, their fridges, their beds. If you donate, you can help families get back up on their feet. So please dig deep. Even if there's any pocket money out there, kids, every single dollar counts. Hi Queensland. Well, today we launched the Queensland Flood Appeal. We've put in the state government $2.1 million. But I just want to give you an example. We've got here where a family has lost all of their possessions, their fridges, their beds. If you donate, you can help families get back up on their feet. So please dig deep. Even if there's any pocket money out there, kids, every single dollar counts.
And as the Premier said, every single dollar counts there. That's good. Well, right now we'll go to Sydney Harbour Bridge, where a major lockdown took place when the car was engulfed in flames after the multi-car accident.
Oh.
That was the petrol tank. Jesus.
Well, right now let's hear from the firefighters who actually went to the scene.
Look, Fire Rescue New South Wales responded to reports of a motor vehicle accident on the Sydney Harbour Bridge just after 7 a.m. this morning. Reports were that there were persons trapped in the vehicles and a vehicle was on fire. We responded a number of crews from both directions so we could ensure access to the motor vehicle accident. Initial crews arriving on scene reported large volumes of black smoke coming from one of the vehicles. So they got to work in an attempt to extinguish that fire. Thankfully, that vehicle, the person did manage to get out of that car before it caught on fire. Crews extinguished the fire in that vehicle. There were 3 cars involved in the accident. A third vehicle did have a person trapped in it. Police rescue on scene commenced an extrication while fire and rescue provided fire protection and assisted in that extrication. A bit of a good news story. Well, TMC have or the Traffic Management Centre have a depot on the bridge, and one of their traffic commanders was on scene quite quickly as a result. The van that had the person trapped inside of it was actually originally located quite hard up against the vehicle that was on fire, and that traffic commander has managed to drag that vehicle away from the car that was on fire. So the van that had the person trapped in it was under threat from fire originally, but that traffic commander's done an amazing job to move that van away from the car that was on fire.
So how did he drag the van away?
I don't have the detail around that. He's basically hooked a hitch up to it with his vehicle and towed it out away from the other car that was on fire. Yeah, so a fantastic job there. I can just see that the police have managed to open 2 lanes on the Sydney Harbour Bridge northbound. As you can imagine, traffic around here would be chaotic. It was this morning, given the time of call and the nature of the incident. We've had slow-moving traffic southbound during most of the incident, but northbound has been chockers. So it's good to see a couple of lanes open now. TMC, police, fire rescue, ambulance, all on scene doing a great job trying to get the bridge open to traffic. So they're just police are doing doing an investigation now. So that'll take a bit of time, but obviously they're well aware of the chaos it's causing, so they'll be trying to do that as quickly as possible to get the remainder of the lanes open. And TMC is also taking care of spills on the bridge. You can probably see around me there's a large amount of absorbent put on the road to absorb the oil to prevent accidents later on.
And Matthew, I don't think we've seen any shots of the van yet that this man was trapped in. Can you tell us what kind of damage there was to the van and go into any more detail for us on how the Fire and Rescue was able to extract this man from the van?
Yeah, so the van, the extrication was undertaken by police rescue on scene, and we assisted with that as well as provided fire protection. But the van was involved at the front end, so the driver was impacted and the front of the vehicle was crushed towards him. So police would have probably done a dash push, which is where we create room between the driver and the dash by spreading the dash forward. Probably had to cut a door off the side, and then in conjunction with New South Wales Ambulance with a medical plan, they would have, as safely as possible but as quickly as possible, removed that person from the van. Yeah. So they've been transported to the hospital now. I'm unaware of their condition at this stage. New South Wales Ambulance will have more details around that, of course.
And Matthew, it's we see accidents on the bridge every now and then. It's not often you see a car burst into flames. What leads to cars bursting into flames in these situations?
Look, many number of factors. Obviously, cars carry fuels and oils, and impacts create sparks, and there's heat in the motor. So it could have been any number of things that caused the fire in the vehicle or caused the fire to ignite. It is unusual for it to happen in an accident. We don't see it very often, but it does happen. And, you know, crews did a great job on arrival getting that fire under control and extinguishing it, and checking the car for people that were inside. And like I said before, thankfully the driver of that vehicle had managed to get themselves out of the vehicle before it was the fire had expanded too much.
So that's a very, very sad news coming out there from Sydney Harbour Bridge. You know, it's hard to see the floods and rains, and the next day there's fires and accidents. So much that happens, and people, especially emergency crews, have to deal with the situation and deal with it right now. And that quick thinking effort of moving the van away from the other place was probably a very, very good effort. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to go to our daily India report. With that, let's welcome Himanshu.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you glimpses of the changing India. In our first story, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi attended the Quad leaders' talk on the Ukraine conflict on March 3rd. The Quad leaders warned that what was happening in Ukraine should not be allowed to happen in the Indo-Pacific. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the leaders of Japan and Australia took part in a suddenly convened Quad summit hosted by US President Joseph Biden on March 3rd to announce a new mechanism for humanitarian assistance in the Indo-Pacific, besides discussing the impact of the Ukraine crisis on the region. The meeting was held even as deep divisions appeared within the Quad grouping. India chose to abstain from every vote at the UN, while all others criticized the Russian attacks on Ukraine. The US, Japan and Australia have been calling for a tough line on Moscow. The Quad summit, which came after an in-person meeting of leaders of the 4 countries in Washington in September last year, will be followed by another in-person summit in Tokyo. Officials said this Quad meeting was held in order to present a united front in the face of the Ukraine crisis and to underscore that Washington's new focus on the European conflict would not take away from the grouping's commitment in the Indo-Pacific region. However, the leaders differed on the emphasis they put on the Ukraine crisis in separate messages. In a slightly different take, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said the Quad discussed the need to stop the use of force in the Indo-Pacific region. In a statement, he linked China's aggression in the region to Russia's actions in Ukraine. Meanwhile, US President Biden tweeted that he discussed with PM Modi, PM Kishida and Australian PM Scott Morrison about Russia's ongoing attack on Ukraine and the Quad's commitment to the sovereignty and territorial integrity around the world, including in the Indo-Pacific. The timing of the Quad meeting was particularly significant as Modi has held 2 lengthy conversations with Russian President Putin in the past week discussing the Ukraine crisis and the need for the safe evacuation of Indian citizens. India and Russia are also in talks about opening a new evacuation route from eastern Ukraine to the Russian border city of Belgorod so that Indians can travel out of the conflict zone and return to India from Russia. Modi and Putin's conversations were held just before the UN Security Council and UN General Assembly votes, where India abstained. The Indian government and the Indian embassy in Kyiv are working hard to evacuate Indian nationals from the war-hit country. The embassy in Kyiv is not shut, but a significant part of the embassy had moved to Lviv. India said that the Indian embassy in Kyiv is not shut, but a significant part of the embassy had moved to Lviv. However, a building of the military facility of Sumy State University in Ukraine's northeastern city Sumy was shelled this morning by Russian force. The mayor of the southern city of Kherson indicated that it had fallen and the Ukrainian forces had left. This follows several days of heavy fighting with Russian forces surrounding the strategically significant city north of the Crimean Peninsula. According to the latest data, more than 7,400 Indians are expected to be brought back to India from Ukraine's neighboring countries on special flights in the next 2 days, the Indian Civil Aviation Ministry said. Indian Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arindam Bagchi during a press briefing also informed that a large number of students had left Kharkiv after an advisory was issued. The total number of Indians waiting to cross Ukraine's western borders has reduced. The spokesperson also mentioned that he was in touch with Russian and Ukrainian authorities for the evacuation of Indian nationals. 13 evacuation flights, 10 by Indian carriers and 3 by the Indian Air Force, were scheduled to return to India on March 3rd. India is considering relief for exporters hit by the Ukraine crisis. Indian banks are scrambling after bills for imports from Russia have started bouncing and payments for exports have been stuck. India is considering guarantees of lenders, letters of credit and soft loans for exporters hit by a cash squeeze following Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Western sanctions imposed on Moscow. Indian banks are scrambling after bills for imports from Russia have started bouncing and payments for exports have been stuck. India exported $3.33 billion worth of goods to Russia in 2021, mainly pharmaceutical products, tea and coffee, while imports totaled $6.9 billion, including defense goods, mineral resources, fertilizers, metals and precious stones. India, which has deep trade and defense ties with Russia, has avoided criticizing its long-standing arms supplier publicly and urged both sides to cease hostilities instead, causing frustration among its other allies, including the United States. Reliance Industries has entered into an agreement to create a joint venture with US-based Sanmina Corp to manufacture electronics in India. The oil-to-telecom conglomerate Reliance Industries has announced entering into a joint venture with the California-headquartered electronics manufacturing services provider Sanmina Corporation for creating electronic devices and manufacturing hubs in India. RIL subsidiary Reliance Strategic Business Ventures Limited will be working with Sanmina Corp's Indian arm in Chennai. In this joint venture, RSBVL will hold a 50.1% stake and Sanmina Corp a 49.9% shareholding. The Reliance subsidiary will also make an investment of about Rs 1,670 crore in the joint venture, which will be capitalized with over $200 million of cash to fund growth, stated RIL in a regulatory filing. Through the partnership, the two companies will make high-technology hardware devices for growth markets and across industries like cloud infrastructure, 5G, medical and healthcare systems, and defense and aerospace, among others. This move would unlock a significant market opportunity for high-tech manufacturing in India. Sanmina's management team in Chennai will look over the JV's day-to-day business, and the transaction is expected to complete before September 2022. Additionally, the two companies will also build a state-of-the-art incubation center for product development, among other things. In a good news for the Future Group and its employees, Amazon.com Inc. and the Future Group have agreed to initiate an out-of-court settlement. This puts an end to a 2-year-long legal battle between the two and will ease Reliance Retail's takeover of the Future Group's retail, wholesale and warehousing assets. Both the Future Group and Amazon's legal teams, who have been in a legal tussle since August 2020 over a deal with Reliance Industries, have agreed to initiate the process of an out-of-court settlement. The Supreme Court of India had given both parties 12 days time to find a solution. The Supreme Court will hear the matter again on March 15th. Amazon's senior lawyer Gopal Subramanian said, "Throughout, we have always been willing to have a dialogue, a conversation. There can be other resolutions to a matter. Is it not a whirlpool? Facing one statutory authority barely because we went through an arbitration. Let us put our hands together and find a solution." The matter being heard in the Delhi High Court and the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal could go as scheduled. Reliance Industries had agreed to buy Future Group's retail, wholesale and warehousing assets for Rs 24,713 crore in August 2020. However, Amazon, which held about a 3% stake in Future Retail through its 49% shareholding in Future Coupon, objected to the deal. The e-commerce giant, led by Jeff Bezos, then had mentioned that Future Group was barred from selling any of their assets to several companies, including Reliance, as per the terms of their deal. The company also alleged that it was kept out of the loop while the deal was being cracked. Bollywood fans are delighted as the wait for the fans of Big B is finally over. The Amitabh Bachchan starrer Jhund finally released in theatres on March 4th. Jhund, starring Millennium actor Amitabh Bachchan in the lead role, is all set to release in theatres on March 4th. The sports biopic is inspired by the life of a retired sports mentor and the founder of NGO Slum Soccer, Vijay Barse. Jhund is the story of an unusual football team. Vijay Borade teaches in St. John's College. The educational institute is situated next to a vast slum locality. The youth in this area are not well educated and do odd jobs for a living. They even resort to stealing jewelry and mobile phones besides stealing coal from moving trains. One day, Vijay spots some of these youth playing football using an abandoned plastic box and realizes their immense potential. He coaches the team and proposes a friendly match with St. John's team. The coach of the St. John's team despises these slum children. He pressurizes his team to score 10 goals and not let the slum team score even one goal. Director Nagraj Popatro Manjule's screenplay is hard-hitting. However, he keeps entertainment paramount. The goings-on get a bit heavy but never turns depressing or too dark. He knows where to draw the line. Many films like Chak De India, ABCD and Hichki have been made in this manner, but Nagraj Popatro Manjule's direction does not let the audience feel a deja vu, as Nagraj sets it in a very real world and also because of the finer nuances. The first half is quite power-packed and the second half also has its share of riveting sequences. The second half of the film touches upon a different kind of struggle of the slum team. Overall, the film keeps you invested in this team's journey through its heartbreaking climax, Manjule's social commentary, great acting, and tugs right at your heart with its emotions. That's all for this bulletin of Daily India Report.
And thank you very much for that wonderful report there, Himanshu. And yes, a movie to be watched and everyone has been waiting for that. June will be wonderful to see that. Well, right now, before we close off for the day today, let's take a look at some of the functions and events taking place. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been wonderful having your company, and that's about all we have for you this morning. And of course, the temperature now, once again, it's gone up on a notch, and it's 25 degrees, partly cloudy, but it's mostly sunny. So it's looking like a glorious day out there. And of course, with no mask now, there's a lot more people out and about, and slowly the supplies are getting back into the supermarkets. In a way, the supply chain was disrupted, and slowly the supplies are making their way back to the shelves. So, please always be considerate of others as well. Or when you are doing your shopping and other things, always do the right thing and be mindful and considerate about others and their need as well. Of course, fair is fair. Well, until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me. It's been wonderful having your company. So this has been an Australian Indian radio production on the 7th day of March 2022. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us.